Okay. Welcome, everyone. So happy to see so many of you. We tried to find the least enterprise room we could find in the building, the design, make, whatever this design room. Um, yeah, because we're going to talk about enterprise today. Well, enterprise and no code, or no code and enterprise, both ways. Um, are we ready to start? I think we are, right? Are we all good there? Oh,
Do you want me
hello?
to
Oh, we
check?
need to take it. Oh, yeah, close to the COVID proof here. We have one more for the audience next, right? All right. Thank you, everyone. So, enterprise and no code. So, last year we were at the summit as well. It was not here. It was somewhere else. It was a much smaller place, and I think it's very fitting for us to be here at Station F today or this week. Because we're really in the mecca of startups, and that shows that no code has a place in this space, in this ecosystem. And last year, I remember the summit was about the maturity of no code, the fact that all the stuff you could build with no code, the the bigger projects, the scalability, performance, security, but also legitimacy. It was really about we are here, we can do really cool stuff. And I see now, and also over the last year, no code in itself, as the platforms, the tools, they really have also stepped up technically, but not just technically, also visually in terms of their positioning, their visibility in general, and their confidence in targeting this new a new level, a level up in enterprise. I saw something the other day about Airtable. They laid off 27% of their workforce in an effort to you called it, what did you say, right size, right? Right sizing, downsizing, focusing on enterprise, and they're not alone, right? You have Glide, Make, Bubble. They all have that narrative now about we want to focus on enterprise. What we'd like to do, because we are an agency, and we'll talk about that a little bit, what we'd like to do is kind of turn that around. Yes, no code is ready for enterprise, but what about the other way? Is enterprise ready for no code? So we're going to discuss that. We're going to go through 3 projects that we did recently with an enterprise level client and talk a little bit about what they faced, how that went, what their challenges were, and the insights. We're going to share some insights into that. We also have, I'm really happy to have Jess here today from Bubble. We are just an agency. We do a lot of cool stuff, but we have a very narrow vision, and I'm really happy that she's here to kind of bridge the gaps a little bit or fill in the gaps. We have a very narrow point of view, of course, with the way that we work, the people and the clients we work with. So it's really, really great to have her here as well. Let me press the button and go to the next one. This is what I was supposed to do, right? Not forget to click the button. But yeah, that's the 3 things, right? So we talk about that already, and then the use cases, and then the good, bad, and the ugly in terms of these projects. So real quick about me. So I have a very typical no-code story to tell. So I'm going to keep that brief. I worked in enterprise, in corporate, got fed up with the sluggishness of the projects that we did, the never-ending projects, the fact that all the fun stuff was done by outside freelancers or agencies that would build a tool for us. And I started looking around. That was 2016, and I found Bubble. And I remember posting on the forum, hey, I didn't really get Bubble. Could you really do an app with Bubble? And could you really make that work and press a button and it would be visible for everyone to see? And I was assured, yeah, you can. I think even Emmanuel chimed in at that time when Emmanuel was still on the forum, replying to people. So I did. I created an app and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I can build an app. I don't know anything about code, but I can build an app. So I quit my job. I became a freelance. And I met Matt on the forum as well. He has a very similar story, coming from a more of a UX research background, working for other large corporations, and his story was very similar. So we teamed up and we were doing small projects, and gradually we grew and grew to the agency that we are today. Also with us, Jess. Very happy to have you here. Maybe you can introduce yourself in a few words.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, I'm Jess. I represent the enterprise segment at Bubble. I joined in January. I have a very different no-code story, but I landed at Bubble based on some past experience. I was doing enterprise sales at Miro, and then Figma, and then Loom. And I'm so glad I'm here at Bubble because how exciting is this?
Cool. Press the button. So real quick, maybe just to set the stage a little bit about who we are. So as we said, we are a Bubble agency. Oh yeah, okay. We are remote by design because I am in the Netherlands and Matt is somewhere really nice in the Alps. So our full team is remote as well, and we did that on purpose to not have a feeling of, okay, there's some people over there in an actual office kind of getting together, and then there's some people really remote and they don't really kind of feel part of the team. So we really kind of stress that remote first mindset, and also that I think that led us to have a very thorough process, and not just a process in terms of how do we build an app and how do we do that, what are the best practices, how do we do around design and around integration of the design, and how do we actually work with an app and make that as scalable and performant as possible and secure as possible, but also in terms of how to deal with the client, how to deal with the project itself. We work with a lot of young people and remote, so it's very difficult to manage that without having that kind of leading thing, that we all kind of stick to. Which doesn't mean it's fluid. It's constantly moving. But yeah, for us the process is really everything. And we noticed in the last few projects, especially when the clients became bigger, that there was a bit of a disconnect with our process and the way that we delivered and how happy clients were. They were happy, but they were a little bit underwhelmed with this no-code promise. It was supposed to be fast. And they were like, well, it's not fast. It's actually, I wouldn't say slow, but it's definitely not as fast as you said it would be. So that got us thinking, why did that happen? And we had some ideas, of course. But yeah, we dug into that a little bit. And the findings of that, we're going to share with you today. We talked to some clients, of course, about that and what they think about that. And we're also going to have Jess chime in on her side. But yeah, before we do cover those projects, maybe let's kind of do a little sidestep into the landscape, just to have everyone kind of on the same page when we talk about no-code and low-code, because for us they're very different things.
Sure. Thanks, Vincent. So just to introduce a bit this idea, it came basically from our discussion when we were thinking about who we are, and especially for this presentation, we kind of try to think together, okay, what does that mean being in no-code, and especially no-code with enterprise. So our session is about, is enterprise ready with no-code, which in a way gives the idea that no-code doesn't know at all about no-code and, enterprise doesn't know at all about low-code and no-code. So this slide was a bit for us to say, well, there is no one no-code or one low-code, but we can see definitely two sides of the low-code market, no-code and low-code market. I took the example in terms of the platform, so I may have Bubble, WeWeb, and Glide on one side, and the other side, I put Salesforce, Appian, OutSystem, and Mendix. And this exercise for us was to understand, well, what is the difference basically between those two sides? I think there is, first of all, a difference about who, what are basically the origin of this low-code ecosystem, basically. On one side, we have, again, Bubble, if I take the example of us, in a way, in a bottom-up approach. It was mainly targeting makers and startups. On the other side, if you take all the other platform I'm quoting here, they really start from the enterprise right away. There is, of course, the question of the why. Of course, there is no code and low code, even though we all know that basically there is some big words, basically some trendy words on both sides. I think what is important also is the why, is how each side define what is an app. Coming from Bubble and coming from this maker and startup, we really see an application at something as a full digital product. When I say full digital product, I would say with branding, this is an experience. I mean, we have all this example of a SaaS, for example. On the other side, they start with the idea of a business process. I would say for what is an app for Salesforce, this is a digitized process, basically, which I think, even though both overlap, an app is both, there is the difference regarding the starting point that they have on both sides. And I take the example, I mean, that was interesting for us to take some screenshots from the landing page. I think you really see that in the way they showcase their product. On one side, again, you have the full product, full startup product branded. On the other side, it's really about business processes with touch point and how do you digitize that. And to end up on that, I think, again, with our discussion, we definitely see a dynamic. We get the impression that the left side is coming progressively on the right side too, meaning they move to enterprise. I think we can see maybe less visible on the other side. We see that with, again, OutSystem and Mendix, for example. They try to put now emphasis of design and branding and stuff like this. So a guess for us would be that there is some sort of convergence, basically, of those two sides. Yeah, that's it on this one. Maybe, yeah, I will hand over to you, Jess. And yeah, thinking a bit about what Vincent said again, we have a partial view of what is no-code and enterprise, and we'll be curious to get your view from as an insider of the no-code ecosystem.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think, what is enterprise at Bubble is kind of pivoting into that right side column you had there. Anyone who's been following Bubble's journey over the last 11 years probably knows that Bubble hasn't always been an enterprise platform. Bubble's vision has always been to help founders and startups realize their success and businesses leveraging Bubble. So the enterprise push at Bubble has been largely driven by requests from agencies and customers, and with large companies as big as Seagate, so like 30,000 person companies. And to outsiders new to Bubble, there's been a perception that Bubble is maybe a playful, maybe a toy, maybe for an MVP. But those who are on Bubble know that Bubble's incredibly powerful, highly extensible, and we even hear sometimes that it's as flexible as code itself. So that said, a large part of the mission in the enterprise push has just been to continue to address the perception of the market, the enterprise market specifically. So at Bubble, we're investing in enterprise, and we're really considering these investments to cater to companies as big as 200 employees, maybe a startup, all the way up until 30,000, 100,000 employees. And we think that they have a lot of similar needs. So the personas that we often see at Bubble are VPs, directors, and individual contributors who are actually coming in and considering Bubble as a solution to change the way that they're developing software within their organization. Also departments such as data, IT, so tech teams, a lot of product and design. I work with a lot of people who actually have a traditional development background, which is an interesting pivot. And with the countless requests that we've received from these larger companies, it feels like a natural transition to start to meet the demands of the market.
All right, let's go now in some concrete example. So we kind of identified in our portfolio 3 projects that we wanted to present today, especially because they are representing, in our mind at least, really the typical use case we see from enterprise using Bubble. Again, using Bubble through an agency, which is slightly different sometimes than coming directly to Bubble. We have 3 types of projects. We have the prototype, we have the internal tool, and we have the spin-off. So for the first one, it was a project that we have done with Steelcase. Steelcase is a global leader in office furniture. They have 13,000 employees globally. It's a 3 billion revenue company. They are based in US, in the furniture city, Grand Rapids in Michigan. And basically we work with them with their Steelcase France because they have also a huge team in France. I can maybe explain at the next. Yeah, I think so. You will click the button a lot, I guess. So for this project, I just want to explain a bit. I mean, for each project, I will do that to understand a bit what I call their journey to no code. Or I would say their journey from their strategy until basically taking the decision of doing an app. And I will discuss that about doing an app in no code, which is certainly an afterthought sometimes with those companies. Regarding Steelcase, so we basically partner with them because they were doing internal strategy workshop. So the idea was to really involve the employee about thinking about the future basically of Steelcase, understand how to cope with the market, what could be new initiative for Steelcase, etc. So it was really, I would say, an initiative about bringing employee also in the innovation regarding what will happen next in the company. From there, they basically split different group, and one of these group was basically thinking about what is exactly the model of Steelcase. So they are in a B2B2C. So they have dealers, for example, and stuff like this, meaning they are not selling directly to their customer. There is always a dealers in between. And if we continue like this, in a way, the group met a lot of time, and they were, it was facilitated by an innovation consultant. And one of the big questions for them was, how might we create additional touch point for sales? So typical design thinking process. And then they basically struggled thinking there is no really access to our product for our client. So I'm really doing the full journey because I think it's interesting because they were not thinking about doing an app from the beginning. I think this is something important to keep in mind. So the app is basically a mean to serve a strategy. They ended up then with this idea of how can we digitize basically our catalog? How can we personalize our catalog, and how each employee can basically decide, or I would say even build their own catalog. So this is why I end up with the show and tell. At the end of the day, they basically decide together to say, well, we have this idea. Why not, instead of just drawing that, or you can imagine having a Figma prototype, for example, why not going beyond and at least trying something like, we call that a prototype in a way, a working product that we can share with our client. So, and here's the result. So we build with them what we call a personalized catalog, with basically sales rep that have an access to a back office where they can craft basically their custom catalog that they can sell to their client or share with their client, again, with this idea of creating additional touch points. Regarding the stack, so it's a pretty easy stack. In a way, it's full vanilla bubble, if I think about it. We integrate HubSpot. Again, it was just to understand, well, can they have direct communication with their client, for example? I wanted to say a bit of word about the team, because I think it's interesting for all those different projects. What should be basically the development team on that? Again, no code is really different than code in this sense. So in the case of Steelcase, so we have basically one no-code builder from Tinkso. What I understand for no-code builder is the person that will do PM, design, and development. This is basically the same person. And in the middle of that, we have then an innovation consultant that was basically the proxy between us as a technical person and the team on the other side. So he was basically leading, I would say, this design thinking exercise about how do we transform our needs into a potential application. So from there, I want just a slide about call that the metrics, because I think it will be interesting then at the moment we have the 3 projects to compare that. Build time, we built that in 3 days. And they basically onboarded 4 clients, really to get some, in a way, insight about, well, would those clients would use basically this app? And I put money saved a lot, and I think this is where this is important and interesting. in my mind at least, I mean, being the person that worked on this project, I think they save money because they realize that beyond the fact that building an app is could be expensive, that would be tricky in a way to right away start with traditional software development, is the fact that they realize that they miss certain data, for example. And I think this is also something important at the moment an enterprise start building an application. It's first, it make them, I mean, it's a realization that maybe you don't have all the ingredients internally to build your app. You don't have access to this data. This data is scattered basically in different places, different APIs to be technical. And I think this is exactly what happened with Steelcase. If I would say the positive output of that is that helped them think that they should first clean their data, understand where is the data exactly, before basically going into an app. Like that. So this is the second use case we have. It was 2 years ago now. We worked with Grenoble Alpes Métropole. We say La Métro, it's easier to say. This is basically the public agency for Grenoble. Grenoble is a city then in the southeast of France. Basically, the metropolitan area is 500,000 residents. And yeah, it's a public agency again with 3,000 public agents. So different than Steelcase for sure. Different organization, different constraint, etc. So let me go with their journey to no-code. I think this one is a typical, I would say it's a typical use case also for no-code because we had this journey in a lot of different clients. So in the case of La Métro, it's based basically on, in a way, it's a major policy in France where they try to implement data-driven operation in this kind of structure. So basically having, I keep the idea of a cockpit because in a way, the way those structure explain that is that they have a project for big software, which is a huge cockpit, where they will see every data regarding basically the city. Those data could be about water, about electricity, basically all the public services. Problem, and I think this is not the only municipality that has this problem, is that, yeah, it's delayed for years. I mean, it's a huge project. They don't have the data for that, meaning, in worst case scenario, they have the cockpit, but there is no dot basically on the map. So this is in this context that we basically partner with the one service of La Métro, which is the public water operation team. We talk about 300 people. They were, in a way, they cannot wait anymore for this stuff because they were really in need of additional data about their daily operation to understand. This is pretty important data in terms of water. Of course, there is the quality of water, but to understand what is the state of the infrastructure typically, where there is some repair to do in the canalization. So they basically push to the hierarchy, say, well, we cannot really wait for this cockpit. Yeah, we want to move faster, and we want to have an app dedicated to our team. That was a mess in terms of red tape, as you can imagine. I mean, having one service, having their own app within this, call that mastodon in French. So they push for that, but at the same time, I think even the hierarchy realized that they were completely on paper-based process, meaning they were unable to, in a way, analyze and track what they are doing in their daily practices. So they receive a budget then for what they call a temporary digital solution. And in a way, I think they are, at the moment they moved to the app, I think that was really the reason for them, or at least the principle behind it, the way they contact us. It's about, well, we want to start small because we need this app tomorrow or yesterday, and we want to iterate later. We need it right now. So let's do the minimum. I would call that an MVP even of their internal tool. And let's think about the rest of the moment we capture data. And we end up then again with a bubble app. So it's I would call that a full field inspection platform. I think what was interesting in there was the chronology of all that. So you can see the bottom part was really the first stuff we did, was purely for agents that they can go on the ground and they can record what they have done. Second part of the project was kind of an interface for their manager so they can understand and list what happened every day, basically regarding the network. So it could be, again, reparation of pipes and stuff like this. And I would say the third phase was really then analysis. So you can see the screenshot on the first screenshot, where it was at the beginning collecting, tracking, analyzing, and I think the last step we are discussing with them now, it's a good bridge with the AI topic, will be about prediction in a way, which was definitely interesting compared to the previous project I talked about. So, well, data first, and from there we can basically iterate on it. So in terms of metrics, so yeah, we have more than 20K operation log since 2 years. We have 100 daily users in this bubble app. Lifetime is interesting because yeah, they wanted a temporary solution 2 years ago. I think in their mind it was something about 6 to 12 months. As of today, the cockpit software is still delayed, so you can imagine maybe for the next 10 years we will have this app running. So the last use case we have, I think in a way this is the most recent type of project that we see. Well, in a way it's really connected to the growth basically of no-code in terms of infrastructure. We call that a spin-off, and this one is a good example, so Cash Plus. Cash Plus it's an app launched by a hedge fund in Asia Pacific. So pretty traditional company, I would say financial services, etc. More oriented toward B2B customer. So yeah, 200 employees and around 50 million revenues. So okay, regarding the journey to no code, again, I think this is a typical, again, spin-off journey. Starting with the decision of diversifying the business and customers. And then they basically move into the idea of, well, we have different assets as a financial service. How can we basically use or propose this asset to different type of customer? Again, they were really in a B2B market. Now the question for them was, well, can we propose investment for individuals? To summarize it. And then from there, I think it's again a traditional also corporate process. They had the idea to really create a spin-off even as an entity within the business, which was definitely a good idea. And then, typical then software development process, meaning they created the end-to-end specification for user flow and business processes. And only at the moment they get that, and basically this scope is validated by the board, this is the moment they decide, okay, well, what type of technical stack can we use for this project? And again, typical for no code. Code was super expensive, so they go back to the board explaining, can we have more budget, which is not the case, and then they go back finally finding no code with again this idea of, well, with no code we can get more with less. I think it's a typical, again, rational for this type of project. The product, so we deliver this, again, B2C, B2B, end-to-end investment platform, way more complex than the previous one, if you think about integration, even legally speaking, because, yeah, we had to, if you think about KYC and stuff like this, or the registry, how do you register your asset? We talk about official shares, basically, in this app. So Bubble, the KYC, we have Twilio, we have a lot of different communication systems in this platform. Regarding the team, if I think about it, we went way more toward the traditional software development organization. So full team with 1 PM, 1 designer, 1 integrator, and 1 to 2 developers, because yeah, no code, it's still complex. At the moment you have a team of developers. In terms of the metrics, so Cash Plus now is 30K users. The time to market in total take 1 year. And basically, regarding the first code they got from code, it ended up 3 times cheaper. I think in general, well, before basically moving to the next slide, I think what I wanted to say with those 3 projects, apart from a concrete example of what type of project enterprise want, it's really the rationale behind it. If you take Steelcase, La Metro, or Cash Plus, in a way you find back what we hear, I mean, everywhere about no-code, the fact that we should use no-code because it's faster and cheaper. It's always the rationale behind it, even though you can see after-thoughts argument, meaning at the moment those companies found no-code, they say, well, on top of that, potentially it can be more flexible. Or on top of that, maybe we can integrate some internal employee in the building process. Yeah, I will hand over to you, Jess, because yeah, as we said before, I would be interested seeing those use cases from our view again of agency. Yeah, how do you see those projects also from Bubble regarding challenges and potentially use case too?
Cool. Thank you. Yeah. And I had finished my last slide talking a little bit about some of the personas we're seeing in the departments, but just to back it up a bit, the way that I see it is that agencies really introduced Bubble to enterprises and no code, but specifically Bubble. But Bubble now, enterprises are coming direct to Bubble. So they're catching up and they're increasingly looking at Bubble to maybe internally leverage a no-code platform to shift the way that they're developing software. So to give a little background on what we're seeing, so since Q1, we've seen a 100% increase in inbound leads quarter over quarter. Yeah, what I find super interesting about those leads is some of our highest velocity deals are coming from folks who started out on Bubble as building passion projects, maybe a side hustle, and they're also individual contributors inside of an enterprise, or maybe they're VP of product inside of an enterprise. And they're realizing the power of Bubble, and they're seeing it as an opportunity to change the way they're doing things inside their organization. And what we see a lot of people coming to Bubble for are 4 key challenges. So first and foremost, building applications and software is expensive and it's resource intensive. It's slow. It can be risky. A lot of companies, I mean, you just shared some great examples of how it can be slow and risky, but we talk to a lot of customers who invest millions of dollars in projects that end up not working out, and so they actually end up trashing them and pivoting. So there's also an increased need for custom solutions. People are kind of exhausted by the amount of software out there, and they see opportunities to kind of, as you mentioned, centralize their data, for instance. So yeah, we're increasingly seeing these leaders want to come to no code, and we also recognize that as a platform provider, we are seeing different requests from enterprise companies than what agencies, for instance, might see. So for a lot of enterprise companies with our recent enterprise launch, things like security and scalability are just table stakes. So SOC 2, GDPR compliance, being able to customize your terms, those are just table stakes, and SSO for features that enable scalability and guaranteed security. Also things like centralized user and app management. We see a lot of people that are considering Bubble across multiple teams. So in order to do that, they need to be able to centralize their user management and have oversight into what their teams are building. So yeah, some of the key use cases we're seeing are pretty similar to what you guys just shared. So we're seeing a lot of internal tools being built, leveraging Bubble. So things like complex CRMs, very custom CRMs, plugging into things like HubSpot, Salesforce. A lot of data visualization tracking tools have been really common. So dashboards and tracking systems with custom UI UX. So maybe they want to plug into Salesforce, plug into Looker, but they want a custom front end. There's also micro apps, which I forget what you called them. I think we call them micro apps and you call them spin-offs. Maybe similar? Yeah, I don't know. We're calling them micro apps. They're not part of the core product, but maybe they're a feature, maybe it's a prototype that they're wanting to test as part of an existing product, or maybe it's a small piece of an app that they're wanting to build and they're recognizing they could build it in a fraction of the time leveraging no code. And the intention behind using no code, I think, is important here. Sometimes the projects that people are using Bubble to build on are exploratory, and they're not sure where they're going to go. But once they start building with Bubble, they recognize how quickly they can iterate and add to that application. We also see a lot of people seeing an opportunity to build cheaper applications and faster, which means they're a bit less precious about apps. So maybe they can build something for a team and let it expire, or sunset the app a couple months later. Also things like microsites, things that are important for a couple months and then they completely get rid of them. And just to give a little example with a customer story, so I've been working with a customer who's been on Bubble for about 2 years, and I think their story is really interesting because it's kind of a trend that we're starting to see within Bubble. Is they had a director of IT find Bubble. He just decided to test it out, onboarded an architect. The architect loved it. She didn't have much of a development background, but had really good understanding of the process. So together they started building applications, and now they have about 10 developers building on Bubble. They've got 5 apps in user testing, 1 is launched live, and they have 5 more apps that are in early stage production. So I think that's a really interesting use case because in just 2 years, they've been able to shift the way that they're building software. And yeah, gotta say thank you to the agencies because you've been evangelizing no code.
All right, so now kind of going back to the beginning in terms of no code, enterprise, is enterprise ready for no code? Looking at those projects and talking to the clients, we kind of distilled 3 main insights that we'd like to address. And overall, kind of get a bit of an answer to the question of, does enterprise really get the most out of no code? And actually, that's no, they don't. Maybe I should do this. So the first insight that we kind of established here is the illusion of speed. So we all know no code and speed. That's the thing, right? It's fast, and that's why it's cheap. You can go a lot of different directions. Don't have to think about risk a lot. But what they don't really kind of take into consideration is that they still work within this corporate structure. They still have a lot of red tape to cover. As an example, we are working with a UK-based kind of enterprise client, and they're waiting now for 2 months on the legal team to come back to validate documents that we need for templates to send out contracts and stuff like that, and agreements. The 2 months is basically it's almost what we estimated up front, and we're just waiting for 2 months. I mean, we can continue, but it's far from perfect. And it basically turns out that this project will take 10 times longer than what we initially agreed to with the client. And we're not the bottleneck. They are the bottleneck, or the board is the bottleneck, right? The board is not a user, but the board is really important in those companies to sign off and make sure that they can actually go ahead. So conclusion, no code is it's not fast at all. It's actually maybe slower than what we expect. Well, definitely slower than we expected, but also maybe slower than when we had gone with a full code solution. I don't think that's the case. I think we definitely are fast still, but it's a shame that they think that no code is not fast, because they're stuck, and they don't really realize that we are also stuck because of them being stuck. And they're like, we're waiting, but can you not do other stuff? Like, well, we're out of other stuff now. You need to provide us with the information we need to continue. So that's the first one. And then the other one is it's a bit typical because of the journey that they go into. And also the mindset, right? Because for a lot of these enterprise clients, they don't really, at the end of the day, they don't really care too much about the technology you use. In a way, it's software, right? Full code, low code, no code, it's all software. We don't really know how it works, but apparently this is better, cheaper, faster. So Okay, let's go with that. The example of Cash Plus, for example. But they still have this mindset of that the traditional software flow. They still take that approach, meaning there's a lot of de-risking involved because they are used to having projects that are 100K, 200K, 400K, and they need to get sign off. They need to make sure that everything is locked, so the scope is locked. What they also do usually, or in a lot of cases, is they go with a design agency or UI UX and do a full mock-up in, for example, Figma. And then they come to us and we look at it, and then we're like, but okay, so you click on that, and then we have this magic data coming in and displaying. Where does that come from? And they get kind of, you see the panic a little bit, and they're like, well, yeah, we didn't really think about that, but let's see. And then it turns out they actually have to go back to the drawing board or with us, and they have to redo a lot of the stuff that they did before. They cannot really go back to the board and say, well, we're going to make that, we're going to make some changes, it's going to be simpler, or because we can also say, well, you can do it like this, but if you do it like that, you may not need to go all this way with a custom chat integration. You can do something with email, for example. Maybe that would work too. And then, again, there's a lot of friction there because they had this budget, they had this scope, it was all locked in. Now they have to go back, get approval again, come back, and we have to redo a lot of the stuff. So, conclusion for them, it's actually not that cheap at all because we have to do a lot of stuff again with you that we already thought we did. So it's not fast, it's not cheap. And the other thing is, well, this is a little bit of the elephant in the room here because no code is easy, right? Everyone can do no code. I heard this morning someone's mom is doing no code. Everyone is doing no code, right? Everyone can build an app. It's easy. And in reality, of course, that's not really the case. And especially when you talk to enterprise clients, this is a big selling point. They're like, oh yeah, that's amazing. We can actually have someone in the team take over and do stuff instead of having to rely on an external party. What I left my job because we were handing everything over in a black box, got it back, it was terrible, we had to redo it, and then it was this endless cycle of iterations where it's like, yeah, can we just change it ourselves? No, of course we cannot because we don't know code. But with no code, you can. So there's this promise of we can take over the app, and at least we can have someone on the app. We can train someone to do that. But in reality, nobody has time for that. There's no one that has a role within an enterprise that is switching completely. They all need to do their job, their real job, and they don't really want to do, they don't want to abandon their current role, or they don't want a responsibility. I mean, if they change something, they click publish, and the whole stuff crashes, yeah, they're all going to look that person. So they want to de-risk their own project. They want to not have the responsibility. So at the end of the day, it all comes back to us. We'll still do it. So for them, no code is just another black box, right? It's really the same. They don't really know how it's working. They kind of know. They can maybe change a color here and there or a button, but that's about it. So it's something that it's a bit of a disappointment sometimes. So taking all of this into consideration, thinking about the main kind of takeaway here, and we're really kind of also hoping that you have some questions and we can go a little bit deeper if we have the time. The main point that we see is that no code is not a stack. It's a process. And the earlier you start with that process in thinking about doing a product, a tool, whatever, the earlier in that process you think about doing that on no code and thinking about that, the better the outcome will be. And as a kind of an example of those, we have some examples. One example of a client that actually did it well, and it's the first one here, run a no-code project as autonomously as you can. They ran some stuff on an enterprise project, and it always ended in the same way. So they decided to create a new company. So their spin-off project actually became a company, and they were really way more separated from the company. They leveraged a lot of the resources, so sales and marketing and that kind of stuff, but they really ran it as a startup. So they could move really fast. There were people in charge. No one was looking at each other to make decisions. They made the decisions. And the best thing about that was, at the end of the day, they had added value. It was not just the product that they built, but the fact that it was a company that had value in itself is an example of where I see that worked better than taking it really internally and handle it as a department project, so to speak. Maybe you want to take the second one?
Yeah, sure. I think it was pretty visible also in the type of journey to no-code that I presented in the previous project, was really this idea that, as Vincent said, no-code is seen as a stack, meaning this is really the last decision you take in your project. I mean, we see that a lot with enterprise clients, meaning they go in scoping, they go in the definition of the app before basically going into, well, what will be the stack decision? And I think, especially for no-code as more than a stack, it's definitely important to take that in consideration from the beginning. Because in a way, yes, you can go faster. The iteration will be faster with no-code, meaning from the start in your project, you should take that in consideration. And finally, the last one is really about, my key example for me is this idea of citizen developer. In a way that I felt that, in a way, the example we have, I would say that it's not really taken seriously. It doesn't mean that you need to elect someone and just decide, well, this person can use the app and open the app. Well, you need to invest in this person. It should be more than just a 1 hour a month role, basically. That you really invest on this person, you try to train his skills to really have someone internally that can develop and tweak your app.
It's not just a task, right? It's a role that you need to take seriously. Yeah. So we kind of wanted to kind of go back a little bit towards end on Bubble's readiness in regards to enterprise. We're always very curious to learn more about what's going on with Bubble, and I'm pretty sure everyone else here might be too. So maybe we can kind of end a little bit on that.
How are we on time? Are we okay on time?
Real quick.
Oh, real quick. Yeah. Well, thank you for debunking and then giving us hope. No. So I mean, we continue to support our traditional segment, so entrepreneurs, developers. But we are making investments in enterprise, and again, we believe that translates across our customer base. Right now, I'm really focused on building up the stories around Bubble, the stories around no code. You guys provided a great customer story for us. I think a big part of my job is continuing to build the trust of Bubble within enterprises. I think as I mentioned earlier, you don't know how powerful it is until you get in there and start using it or use an agency. But it's pretty incredible. And so that's a big part of my job. But in the short term, in terms of kind of product roadmap, we're working on a lot. We have a scale team that's working to work on bulk data manipulation is a really highly requested focus at Bubble, and things like mobile. We are investing in continuing to invest in our version control. And in the long term, there's going to be some exciting stuff around AI, more ways to collaborate within Bubble. And for more on our product roadmap, we'll see you at BubbleCon if anyone's joining in person or virtually.
Cool. Well, thank you for spending the time with us. Do you have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You say that no code is more like a process, and thanks. And you should have been involved earlier in the process, but does it have to do with no code or more with the fact that these are people who design a piece of software while it's not their job, and it could have been true, using code or no code, that involving the professionals earlier is always a good thing.
Yeah, you're right. And they do, but then they still go to no code. And then there is this disconnect that we talked about just now, that they take that approach and then they go to no code, and we have all of the we have a lot of abilities with, for example, Bubble, to do a lot of the stuff that they thought they needed to do first before going to a dev shop, right? We're not a dev shop, and I think that's an important thing to realize, is that we don't necessarily have that dev background. Yes, we've accumulated that, but we also come from a very product-orientated background. So in them doing all of this stuff up front and then coming to us thinking that we're going to do dev work, that's where the disconnect comes from. And that's where I think, especially with no code, it kind of makes that point very clear, that doing it a little bit earlier in the process will save a lot of time and money, as opposed to normally where, yes, you would go to a design agency and do a lot of the UX and UI up front and then do the development. Whereas here, with especially with Bubble, there's way more of a playground to do both of them, and you don't have to be all that kind of rigid in the beginning. You can actually pretty quickly set up something pretty nice and just kind of use it as an actual app and not just a Figma prototype. So yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, you need to run. I'd like to have a few more. Yeah, go ahead.
Great presentation, guys. Just one question about just the aftercare and maintenance of these enterprise projects, because we appreciate that we're still quite early in the enterprise and no-code space. How much time do you budget or cost do you budget for after the project has been shipped? And do you anticipate that to become problematic? Because any Bubble developers here, we know that Bubble works well when you've got 5 or 10K rows, but in a couple of years' time, you might have 100, 200, 300,000 rows, and then that page now takes 20 seconds to load. Hang on, guys, what's going on? Is that something you guys anticipate to be sort of involved in, or are you sort of pushing the paradigm that it should be an internal stakeholder that's being trained up and should be managing those problems that come up?
Yeah, so the question is about scalability in the long run with these types of projects.
And your involvement in it.
And our involvement, yeah. Well, I definitely feel the projects that we do now, and sometimes we'd use other backends too, depending on the size of the project, that are by default a little bit more scalable. But Bubble has really been great at pushing updates in performance. So when you talk about that number of records, that I don't necessarily think that's an issue with Bubble these days. In terms of maintenance, well, in a way, that's a business model too, right? It's the longevity is interesting for an agency in terms of continuity of the pipeline and having a bit of a smooth trajectory in terms of turnover. Yeah. I saw one more. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And I just had two questions, one for the Tinkso team and one for the Bubble team. So first of all, concerning the Bubble team, in the, how do you say, like in the community, a lot of people are expecting from long time an app on the phone. Is there any plan on it or not? Like on the long-term plan?
No comment. No comment.
No comment.
Join us at BubbleCon.
All right, I'll do it. And
we tried to get a little tip of the, but no, BubbleCon.
Okay, well, sure, I will. And concerning Tinkso, so actually I could see that you've been working with a lot of big companies as well, not only like small startups. And I was just wondering, as a no-code agency, you know, when you are a normal developer, let's say, the company is often requiring some more information or on updates about the website. So insofar as you say yourself that anyone can do no code, are the agency not scared about that years after years, when everyone will be able to no code, there will not be any more jobs on the market?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think yes. but I think more on the technical side of things. So building an app, coding an app, programming an app. Well, programming is already a little bit different, but the programming itself, the actual building, I think AI can do that pretty quickly, pretty soon. In a way, if you look at it, I see no code as a precursor to AI, because in a way, for us, no code was a way to interface with code without really understanding code or being able to write code ourselves. And the next step would be, I'm not going to do an interface visual programming. I'm just going to prompt an AI to tell me what I want, and then that's going to be built. But what you build, it still can suck, right? It still can be terrible. So you still need to have people with the right mindset and the right skill set in terms of what product to build, and for who and when that prompts the AI at some point or builds the no code. So that's why I think in general, being just a developer, I think that's going to be tough moving forward. But yeah, we're not an AI session, but yeah, I'm not really afraid of what we do, because we do so much more. It's from consulting to implementation, and that's what that's a real nice thing about what we do, is that we have a really small chain. So from product consulting to design to implementation, development, integration of complex APIs and stuff, we can do that all not with the same people, but the people that speak the same language, the language of Bubble and no code. So yeah, I don't see an issue in that regard. But for development, I think you're right. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not sure we have any time left. I don't see them actually looking at us. Maybe we have one more question. Otherwise, we are stopped. Okay, we need to stop. Press the detonate button. We're out. We're going to be here maybe for a little bit. If you want to come up to us, talk to us, have a question, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll be downstairs in the booth as well. Thank you so much for your time. And
Yeah, Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you.